Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the SBK Betting Podcast. My name's Adam Baylis and I'm filling in this week for Jess Stafford, who is in sunnier climes over at Del Mar in California for the Breeders' Cup. And of course, if you'd already watched or listened to our Breeders' Cup preview podcast, you'd know that. If you haven't, well, watch this first or listen to this first, and then go over and have a listen to that because I know everyone will be very keen to hear who Mr. Tom Collins is putting up in the Breeders' Cup Classic and beyond. So well worth checking that out. Right, back to less sunnier climes in the UK, and I'm joined by Tom Collins and Mr. Ross Millar, and it's jumps racing all the way. Ross, how do you feel?
Partly relieved, partly excited, partly a little bit sort of trepidatious still. You know, I'm just not convinced we've got a real strong form lines to grasp hold of just yet, with people having their first runners and summer horses going through. But yeah, really enjoyed Cheltenham entry last week, and we can kick on now. TC can keep a couple of all-weather picks, but we're jumps all the way now, aren't we?
Now, this is a bit of a curveball, Ross, because it hasn't been in the running order, but I wanted to ask you, you talked there about it sort of being early season, and I'm interested to understand how you approach punting in the early season of the jump season, and perhaps a couple of trainers that you might want to highlight that are going well and some that aren't, because obviously it's been a fairly sort of cumbersome start for the likes of Nichols and Henderson.
Yeah, so with caution, quite frankly, Adam, I think, especially me, I'm so excited to get the jumps back going and your old favourites are back out. Just think you have to take a step back. It is a long season. The one thing I would say about form, and I got tripped up on it, and actually no one picked up on it. I got my tin hat on. I wrote for Racing TV a while back that Dan Skelton went quite a while without a winner, and I thought there was a few that weren't running through the line. And I highlighted it, and the next day he had 3 winners, and the day after that he had 2. So it can change very quickly. Dan Skelton is definitely a yard that's in good form, as is Ollie Murphy, as is Harry Derham. Now, they are, I would say, that the guys that are trying to get to the top rung of the ladder in the UK. I don't think it's a surprise that they feel this is a time when they can make hay. They know that Nichols and Henderson are perhaps a bit more relaxed about bringing their horses along slightly slower. So this is their chance to pounce and pick up some sort of perhaps easier contest than they might get now from sort of December onwards. So Skelton, Ollie Murphy, Harry Derham, they're the yards I just automatically look and see where they're running and what they're running.
Duly noted. Well, some of that applies for this week, and we're going to start with the Charlie Hall Chase, which is a decent enough contest, to have early in this season. And as far as the betting goes, Brave Man's Game is our market leader around 6-4, Grey Dawning 5-2, Conflated 9-2, French Dynamite 11-2. It's 14-1 bar. Ross, talk us through this contest. I gather you're not wild about the head of the market.
Well, I think it revolves around the head of the market. I'm just not wild about it as a race because it's quite competitive, but I feel it's one of those races that you should be able to unpick. And I'm not sure I can. There's just a little bit too much unknown for me to have a strong opinion, and I do like to have strong opinions. So I think it revolves around the 3 at the top of the market: Brave Man's Game, Grey Dawning, and Conflated. I'll start with Grey Dawning. He's the 7-year-old. He's the sort of rising force. We perhaps don't quite know where his ceiling is yet. Officially got a rating of 157, but it's important to note he carries 11 stone 7 here versus 11 stone 4 from Conflated and Brave Man's Game. So you effectively make his 157, 154. That gives him £12 and £13 to find with those guys. I was quite cool in him last year, and it paid me at Cheltenham. You know, I was dead against him, and he was very good. He jumped very straight, but he undoubtedly has got a quirk in him where he can dive across one left, particularly when fresh, particularly when exuberant, which he might well be first time out, and particularly when he hasn't got a running rail on his inside. Now, the fences at Wetherby down the back straight are away from the railing. They've got a rail guiding them into a wing, but there's no rail on the landing side, no wing on the landing side. Just worry that he might go diving out to his left, as he did at Haydock when winning that graduation chase. But you caveat that of all the runners in here, his yard's in the best form. Dan Skelton, 27%. He's clearly got a high cruising speed. I'm also just not, and I'm sure I'd be pretty lonely in this, I'm not convinced he stays 3 miles. I know he's won over 3 miles, but that was the Hampton Court, and that race absolutely fell apart. Broadway boy didn't run his race. Apples Away, she just didn't turn up either, and she's not quite what I think people were expecting her to be over fences, and he was rather left a bit of a gift, albeit it was over 3 miles. He never came off the bright, had to find. When you watch his wing back in the Turners, 2 lengths from Ginny's Destiny, who's a horse I really like, but I'm not sure he's a top-notcher. And when you watch it again, actually, in the back of the screen, Jello was coming back at them. He was finishing stronger than the front 2. They did go hard from the top of the hill. He might well stay 3 miles on this easy track, but I'm not sold on it. So whilst my initial thought was this is the one I want to be with, 5-2, I'm not so sure. That then leads me to Conflated, who's actually top rated, 167, got 11 stone 4. He unseated on his return, but he would at least have been forward for that return, so you'd think he's going to have plenty of fitness. And I think if you look at his runs last year, his run at Aintree in the Melling Chase, when just behind John Bond, is probably the single best piece of form any of these recorded last year. That led me to think he was the one. And the only thing that stops me is that they've been quite vocal about the fact that he was going to the cross-country chase at Cheltenham. That was going to be his long-term target. And they've sort of quibbled about, that makes it difficult now that it becomes a handicap. I just worry that this might be one of those runs where he comes over, trawls round at the back of the field, and they throw their arms in the air and say, look, his rating of 167 is ridiculous. A bit like they did with Tiger Roll when they didn't run him in the National. That's my one concern, that they've sent him here rather than going to the Champion Chase at Down Royal. But I think if he puts his best foot forward, I think he's got the beating of these. Brave Man's Game, 166, again 11 stone 4. Got outstayed last year when a poor jump at the last didn't help, but that was on soft ground. Paul Nicholls' form has got to be a little bit worrying. 4 winners from 21 in the last 14 days. That's 1 in 12 in the last 7 days. It is a worry, but this would have been the target. He did say, all last year people were saying that maybe the Gold Cup from 2023 had left its mark, and he refuted that. Saw an interview the other day, he said that he's maybe starting to come around that might have been playing on it because he thinks the horse looks in better form this time around. He'll like the ground. He's definitely better in a small field contest. His jumping will be able to put pressure on Grey Dawning's jumping. I like plenty about him. I just don't like it. It's just back in Brave Man's Game at 6-4 just doesn't sit right with me, because he's a perennial solid but not quite getting it job done sort of horse. So I'm not going to have a bet. I'll watch it with interest. My selection will be Conflated, but with the caveat that I hope they come over and try and take part and don't try and make a statement. But I think he's got the ground. This trip, sharp 3 miles, will suit him. He'd be the one. But it's a race to watch, really.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, it really is a bit of a guessing game at this part of the season. TC, I'd be keen to hear what your thoughts are on this headline jumps contest on Saturday.
I'm still not in jumps mode just yet. It's Breeders' Cup weekend, I have to admit, so sorry guys. I know, Ross, you're not going to be happy about that, and also the listeners probably aren't happy either. But I will do my best to tune in to the Charlie Hall. Obviously, it's one of the better races of the early part of the jump season, and we've got some top quality horses in the race, so I've got to kind of do my way and watch the race. And I probably won't be tuning into the other race we'll cover, but I will for the Charlie Hall. The quick ground is the main talking point, isn't it? It's super quick. The clerk of the course doesn't want to water unless he has to. And good ground, good to soft ground, just absolutely screams Brave Man's Game. So I think it would be foolish to look elsewhere. He is going to be my pick in the race, despite the fact he is a short enough price. But I think that price is justified based on his superiority on ratings and the horse that we know Brave Man's Game is. He always turns up in the early part of the season. He's won 2 out of 3 races fresh since he's gone chasing. All 3 of those have been in October. And the only time he's lost, first time up in October, over fences, came in this race last year when he was beaten by Gentleman's Game, but it was on a soft surface, and also he completely missed the last fence. Harry was on the bridle going into it. He smashed his way through the birch, and unfortunately he emptied out first run of the year and took a blow in the latter stages and wasn't able to win. Everyone was critical of Harry's ride that day, but he couldn't really control what happened. So I'm willing to overlook that. He's basically 3 from 3 so far, first up in October. I think he can make it 4 from 4. And his opposition here isn't the kind of opposition that would usually scare Brave Man's Game. So I'm just going to stick with him. And hopefully he can justify favouritism for Paul Nicholls in the Charlie Hall.
So it's Brave Man's Game for TC then. Trusting that Nicholls will have him straight for this. Listen, for what it's worth, I haven't got a huge opinion on it. I thought it was quite interesting that the Real Whacker was pretty well supported in the Kerry National market. Obviously unseated rider that day, went off 8-1, 9-1. I've never been able to catch this horse right, but that form of the Cotswold Chase last year when he was second to Capodanno isn't terrible. And I thought it's interesting for a horse that is fit. Likewise, French Dynamite been going pretty well the last twice over in Ireland. Has the lump 11.8 here, but again, could be interesting for one that has race fitness on the side. Right, from the Charlie Hall Chase, we're now going to move over to Ascot, where there's actually a really good card of racing. It's a meeting I always quite like, and we're going to focus on the Sodexo Gold Cup handicap chase, which has got a fair field there. Just to go through the prices, Chianti Classico's at 11-4 fav for Kim Bailey. Am I right at fives? Our Power eights, Miles from Wicklow nines, and a 10-1 bar there, I think. Ross, talk us through this Sodexo handicap chase for which SBK users can avail themselves of a 25% winnings boost. T's and C's do apply.
It's going to pay me, Adam, but I mean, I love Chianti Classico. I was pretty early on the bandwagon with him as a novice hurdler. Loved what he did last year. But the one time he ran poorly last year was at this track. He still won, but he kind of fell in, and David Bass picked him up and carried him the last mile. It was a real typical David Bass ride. They said afterwards that he didn't enjoy the ground. Well, the ground is going to be pretty much similar here, and it was the fences down the back straight that he wasn't particularly fluent at. Tom Bellaby's a fine jockey, but he's a very different jockey to David Bass. He's not going to pick him up and throw him at fences down the back straight. They're talking about building forward to the Grand National. I'm just not quite sure this will be his Gold Cup. I love the horse, and I'm sure I'll pick him up at some point in the season. But just on this track, on this ground, off top weight, I'm going to oppose him. Am I Right? It is a horse I've got history with, but not good history. He's just let me down time after time. He's becoming quite well handicapped. I think he'll like this ground. I think he's ground dependent, but he's not won in 2 years. Conditional jockey that's not had much experience in the UK takes the ride. That would temper my enthusiasm for him. I actually came down on the outside of the field, 20-1 with SBK. Dan Scout and trained phlegmatic. He beat Chianti Classico at Kempton last year, 2 lengths, getting £5. He now gets £13. He's got really good course form, right-handed, good form at Ascot, place form, good winning and place form at Kempton. He's definitely better right-handed, and he's been very cleverly placed to run at Uttoxeter for his final run last year, at Chepstow his first run this year. He's come down from 143 to 139 for 2 runs on tracks that simply just won't have suited. I think it's a really clever piece of training. Tristan Durrell takes £3 off. I had a little sort of play last year that I basically opposed Tristan Durrell in chases. I didn't think he was doing a great job. And actually, at the back end of the season, he turned around. He rode this horse really well to win at Kempton, got some really good jumps out of him. The yard, as I said, is knocking along at 27%. I do not understand why he's outside of the field here. I think he's an absolute knockout each way bet at 20-1 with SBK.
I love it. For what it's worth, I mean, I was sort of looking through the field, and there was one, and Ross, you might be able to sort of flesh out the form a bit for me, but Tom Lacey's high stakes player clearly wants good ground, but it has that element of a bit of a winning machine and one that could kind of kick on a bit this season. I thought it was quite interesting at 11-1.
Yeah, he was on my shortlist. I'm just a little bit concerned about yard form. They seem a little bit hit and miss. They've had a couple of winners yesterday or in the last 2 days, and I just wonder about him in a big field or bigger field handicap. He just looked a bit moody at times, I thought, and I just think he perhaps would be one for Kempton, slightly smaller field where he just gets a bit more daylight, possibly.
Fine, so it's slight contention there. TC, what do you think about this contest, mate? How are you getting on with it?
I'll be honest with you, I won't be betting in the Sodexo Gold Cup this year. You may want to use either my opinion to formulate your own opinion around, or just trust Ross. He's got much better knowledge over these jumps races in the early part of the season. Well, through the season, to be honest. So I will throw out a token selection and suggestion, and that is going to be Am I Right? I think it's a very fair price for Henry de Bromhead. I love the fact that he tried him over hurdles last time. Absolutely screamed of a prep run, and the Irish do it so well. Run them over hurdles, come over here for a big task, a big early target, and get the job done, or at least go close. Good ground is crucial to him, and it looks like it's going to be a very fast surface on Saturday Ascot. No rain forecast from what I could see, and it's already listed as good. So I think the conditions are definitely going to suit Am I Right? He won his first ever chase, his beginner's chase in Ireland on a good ground. He ran on good ground in the London Gold Cup. No, it wasn't London Gold Cup, but it was a Grade 3 chase at Sandown last year. And he travelled so well, jumped brilliantly, and just didn't stay the 3 mile 4 furlongs that day. So I'm willing to overlook him on that basis. The drop back to his ideal trip's perfect. Maybe he can go close in the Sodexo Gold Cup, but I won't be having a bet in this race, I have to admit.
Right, thanks TC, exuding confidence there for Ascot's headline contest of the day. let's move over to best bets. There's obviously a lot of racing across the UK and Ireland. There's obviously some big meeting there at Dam Royal and some decent stuff at Newmarket. Let's start with UTC because I gather you've got one that you quite fancy still remaining on the flat.
Just one selection this week. It's going to be my nap. No next best. As I say, I'm focusing on the Breeders' Cup, and there's not much flat action that really captures my imagination. Newmarket is okay over the course of their card, but nothing really screams bet me. So there's just one selection. It's going to be the nap, and that is Madame de Sevigne. She goes in the 4 o'clock at Newmarket, the final race for Robert Edery. Now cast your minds back to 2018. Robert Edery had a horse called Graceful Lady. In the back end of 2018, she won 2 handicaps in these same orange, white and green silks. The last one came at Newmarket and she sluiced up, both occasions on testing ground. Skip forward to 2024, Madame de Sevigne, same silks, 3-year-old, improving, another filly, goes to Newmarket for the final run of the season, already had a win at the track last time out in scintillating fashion. I think she backs up. Sean Dylan Bowen takes the ride. He takes off £3. The handicapper only put her up £3 for that victory, so she gets to race off the same mark. This is her trip. She'll get her conditions. This is actually a weaker race too. It's a 0 to 80. That race she won 4 weeks ago was a 0 to 90, so she faces weaker opposition in this contest. I don't see what's not to like about Madame de Sevigne. So she is my nap this Saturday in the 4 o'clock at Newmarket.
Okay, that's Madame de Sevigne for TC, his best bet of the day at Newmarket. That comes in the 4 o'clock. There's an absolute cliff horse in there for me at Jim Boyle's Marlow Park, but I think we'll trust TC. Ross, I trust you've got something that's slightly more jumpy for us.
Yeah, no, I looked through all weather cards, Adam, but it was too tricky for me. My nap comes in the 3:15 from Ascot, and it's the Ben Pauling trained Fiercely Proud. It's got a mark of 129. I think you've got to put a line through his final run at Sandown in April. But he was returning off a 2-month layoff. He'd met with a small setback that meant he missed Cheltenham. The yard was sort of coming out of form in April as well. So I happily put a line through that Sandown run. Before that, he was second in the Dovecot behind Lump Sum. Lump Sum was rated won a handicap off 134, won the Welsh champion Herb. He's now rated 141. Iddy Wood was in third. He was 6 lengths behind. He won a handicap chase off 120. He's now rated 125. And the 4th horse, Helmvine, was 8 lengths behind, and he's won a handicap off 121. He's now rated 128. Does suggest that's a strong piece of form. Fiercely Proud still looks well handicapped off 129, and he was very well supported for the conditional jockeys handicap hurdle at Cheltenham last week, and unfortunately his poor conditional jockey's leather snapped on the way to the start. He tried for a short time to stay on and then decided against it and bailed out, and Fiercely Proud ran loose. Provided there's no ill effects from that, I think it's just the yard think he's well handicapped. A little bit quiet perhaps the yard, but they're firing in a few winners. He's only a 5-year-old, plenty of upside, so Fiercely Proud in the 3:15 at Ascot is the nap. And then the next best, it's actually a horse I put up as one of my horses to follow in the Miller's Movers. It's the Lucinda Russell trained Rochevelle, runs in the 3:05 at Ayr. He's run 3 times, won 3 times, and he's made really good use of these juvenile races. He won a juvenile national hunt bumper, and he then won 2 juvenile national hunt hurdles. Beaten stablemate I Wish You, 3.5 lengths, drawing away over course and distance. I think another 50 yards, it would have been 13 lengths. He was really powering away at the end. He travels strongly. He was a bit novice in his jump in that second run. It was better on his third run. I Wish He was now rated 114, won very nicely on his own handicap debut. I just think this is a horse that's going place. He's a strong traveller, jumps well, stays well. He's got a mark of 120. He had 6 entries in the last 7 days. I've been tracking him. This is the one they've come for. That'll do for me. Lucinda Russell's just starting to hit a bit of form, particularly around the Scottish tracks. So Rochevelle is the next best in the 3:05 from Ayr.
Love it. Some phenomenal selections from Ross. Well, hopefully phenomenal. There's one from me from Newmarket. I apologise. I'm still kind of slightly in flat mode, and it's Grecian Legacy in the 142 for Daniel and Claire Kubler. Bit of a perennial bridesmaid on the previous 3 runs, but looks really interesting going into this nursery based on previous form. That opening run at Donny behind King of Angels, whilst he didn't get any that close to him, was really promising, and he's been in amongst some good horses since. So I think he's definitely one to keep an eye on in that nursery handicap. That's in the 142 at Newmarket on Saturday. Right, I think that's us for today. Like I say, if you haven't checked it out already, do go and have a gander at our Breeders' Cup preview with Jess and CC. That's live now. Like I say, we've got a boost on the Sodexo Gold Cup. That's 25% winnings boost. T's and C's max and stakes do apply. There's a 20% Breeders' Cup ACCA boost to avail yourself of the action on Friday night. And there's also a 25% winnings boost on the Breeders' Cup Classic. Ross, do you think City of Troy will get that done?
Oh, I've read so much, Adam. I mean, I think it's quite interesting that it adds a level of interest for me because the Breeders' Cup would slightly pass me by. I tend to watch the juvenile races, not a lot else. I'll definitely be watching. I'd love to see him go and get it done, but I think you have to listen to people that say that his action isn't suited. And you look at these dirt horses, physically, he just looks very different. So I think he's going to have to be every bit as good as they've been telling us he is. And I don't think we've seen that, to be honest. I don't think he's looked as good on the racetrack as they clearly think he is. If he takes after his father, then he's got a great chance, hasn't he? But I'd love to see him do it.
Yeah, just a case of how strong the Ballydoyle marketing machine is with him, really, isn't it? Can I get a line from you, Ross? Just your thoughts on what's happened with the Melbourne Cup situation with Jan Brueghel. Just what's your take on that?
A lot of poor information, isn't there? In that, if you're going and playing in someone's house, you play by their rules. Now, my understanding is that they can say that they had all the scans done in Ireland, but actually it was a different type of scan that picked it up. But it picked up shadows. Now, again, my understanding, and I'm not a vet, is that 3-year-old horses are continually putting down bone. That can continually put shadows on scans and X-rays and that sort of thing. And when selling horses, very rarely do I come across a horse when I'm selling or buying that has a perfect set of X-rays and scans. Everything is normally taken under sort of advice. So I can see why they feel hard done by, but at the same time, given this was the set of connections that took a set of American stalls to Southall for City of Troy to try, surely they can get an Australian vet with an Australian scanner set up in Ballydoyle to save themselves the heartache. I'd be disappointed if it was just Racing Victoria trying to stop an outside raider winning their race. That would be really poor.
Yeah, it does feel like there's something more to it that isn't necessarily being articulated in the press. But we shall see. Perhaps conversation awaits in the form of City of Troy on Saturday night. I should flag that all new SBK users do get £40 in free bets when you sign up and bet £10 for the first time. Again, that's 18 plus, and T's and C's do apply. So please do take a look at those. Right, a phenomenal weekend of racing in store. Whether it's Breeders' Cup, the slop at Newmarket, which I think it's good ground now. It's been unseasonably warm, hasn't it? Or the fantastic jumps action at both Wetherby and Ascot that tickles your fancy. There's lots on offer. Ross, thanks a lot. And TC, thanks as always. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend and enjoy the racing.